Hey everybody, we're here at Boondocker. We're with Rocky Jr. A lot of people have questions about ring gap, setting ring gap, and it's very important that we do this when we're changing up pistons, installing them in a cylinder that they're not really, they've never been in before, right?
Right. Yep.
So why don't you tell everybody what we're going to do here?
So we're gonna set the clearance on the top two rings. The oil rings are usually okay. We'll check the clearance, make sure that there's enough clearance there. But the top two rings, the compression rings, are really critical. So you can probably put them together without setting the gap, but they'll be too tight. And so what happens is the ring gets hot, and then it butts up against itself, and then it grows bigger than the cylinder, and then it just wears the ring out fast. So your piston set will usually come with some specs. It's based on bore and what kind of use it has, street or turbo. We kind of set ours up a little bit on the tight side, but
with a two-stroke application, you have your if they expand, they'll expand into the openings and the rings, then they'll sort of bulge in there, and then you run into big problems, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, in a two-stroke, they're going past the ports, and if they get too big, then they'll bulge out into the ports, and then you'll snag a ring. On a four-stroke, the ring actually is turning all the time, and so then it will grow, and then it can't turn, and it'll actually score the cylinder as it goes up and down.
Right.
So I'll show you how to do it. You have an oil ring set. There's a top and bottom oil ring. These are the same, and these actually on this particular set are not directional. So these three rings will go together.
Yeah, some rings are chamfered on one side.
Yeah, almost always. And you can see this is just a general rule. Automotive rings and everything. I don't know if you can see that, but right at the end of my finger, there's an R on this one.
Yeah,
it's very, very tiny.
Just doesn't focus.
Yeah,
There.
You see that? And then sometimes it'll be a dot or something. This other ring here is, you look for it, this one has a writing on RN. Again, sometimes it'll be a dot or a star or something. Those always go up. They always go up. So you always look for a mark at the end of the ring. So what we'll start with is this chrome ring is the top ring, this cast ring is the lower ring, and it doesn't matter which you start with. I'm going to set them at 16 and 18 thousandths, so the cast ring will be just a little bit bigger.
How do you know what the gap's supposed to be? Is it a manufacturer spec?
Yeah, and it's calculated off the size of the bore, and so they'll actually it'll come with a spec that tells you if it's this bore size, then divide by this, and that's what your ring gap will be. I use a piston. Take one of the pistons we're going to use, flip it upside down, and push the ring down into the cylinder. And just far enough that I know that the ring's square in the cylinder. This is a lower ring. I'm going to set it at 18 thousandths. And so I got my 18 thousandths feeler gauge, and it doesn't fit. So I'll sand the end of it. They make a ring grinder. We're in a fab shop, so I have a really fine sander. So I use that. But they make ring grinders. Some people hand file them. The thing you want to do is you just want to make sure that you stay square, and square to the eyeball is good enough, so that when the gap comes together, it doesn't have one point that's tighter than the rest of them.
Okay.
So what I try to do is take not too much off, just cut twice.
Right.
I can always cut more off.
Yeah.
Really close, that's really close. That's a tight 18, so I'll go with that on that ring. tight 16. So that's it. I always keep the rings with the cylinder that I measured them in, just in case there's a slight difference from one cylinder to the other. We can check the oil rings. I don't actually check the oil rings on these sets anymore because they always have a gap. It's about 18 thousandths on that one, so we're good.
So now you're going to put the rings on?
Yeah, I'll put the rings on the pistons. I can show you how to do that.
Yeah.
On these razors, on this one we're doing an in frame, and so we're putting the pistons in the engine's in the vehicle. It's not the easy way to do it. In fact, it's really difficult. If you go by the service manual, they take the engine out, they put the pistons in the cylinder first, and then build the motor up from there. But so the way I orient the rings will be different than how we do in the service manual, because I need to keep them in a position where I can get them in this way. So you always start with your lowest ring on the piston is going to be the oil ring assembly. You start with this corrugated. This is what's going to hold the oil, and then it'll wipe the cylinder with oil in there. So I put that gap right in line with the wrist pin, the gap on it, and it actually butts up against itself. And then the rest of that assembly are these upper and lower oil rings, and I put those front and back to the piston. And I stagger them. Now these oil rings won't turn from each other because they're on this corrugated piece, so wherever you put the gaps on those,
It's going to stay there.
is where they'll stay. Now the whole assembly will turn in the cylinder. The way the cylinder is cross-hatched, they should always be rotating into a new position, otherwise you'd get grooves.
So there's no pin on these like you'd find on a two-stroke?
Right, no pin. The reason a two-stroke has a pin is to keep the ring, the end, from coming into the port.
That's right.
So, and so I just position these so that my gaps are front to back, because my cylinder drops down in the front and the back, and I can reach in on the sides and hold it together. That's why I position them that way. So I continue to stagger them all the way up. You'll notice on this particular set, now this isn't always that way, but this ring will only fit in the groove that it belongs in. This cast ring will only fit in the lower groove. So that's the groove I run them in. And I roll them on that way, just like that.
I like that technique.
See, you watch your, make sure that my marks are facing up always. And then I go ahead and stagger these front to back also. Doesn't really matter where you position the rings. The factory always has some spec on it. Different guys do it different ways, but like I said, they're always turning, and they will turn at a different rate. So there's actually times that they'll come in line with each other and then pass each other while they're turning. But your lowest compression is going to be when everything's all in line. So don't line them up, just stagger them. That's just kind of that's how the old mechanics do it. So.
Right.
And then so that piston will be ready to go in on the rod, and then we'll finesse it into the cylinder.
Yeah, I can't wait to see that. All right, guys, that is how you set the ring and gap. Very important thing to do. You have to do it every time when you're putting a new piston inside your cylinder. Rocky Jr. here at Boondocker. He's the pro. He showed you how to do it. Thanks for watching.
Thanks.